Welcome to Conversations with Character. I am here with Patrick Alonso, who is a pharmacist and so much more. He's an advocate. I can't wait to get into his story. Let's start at the very beginning, Patrick. How old are you? Where are you from?
Well, Corey, I just wanted to thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it. So I'm 36 years old, and I'm from Tampa, Florida, homegrown guy right here in Tampa, Florida.
It's a hell of a place to be a pharmacist.
It is. It's a growing city, so there's a ton of opportunity. I think we call it, like, I guess ourselves native tampons. We're all like, oh man, there's so many people coming into Tampa, but it's so great because there's just so many more opportunities for business. There's opportunity to impact lives. So I'm excited to be a lifelong resident here in Tampa, Florida.
Absolutely, man. Tell me about growing up.
Oh man. Well, when I was a kid, really young, my parents got divorced. My dad had some substance abuse issues, and that's a really powerful topic and kind of area of conversation for me because addiction grabs so many people, and it's had such an impact on my life, the relationship with my dad. And my dad, from all accounts, I think him and my mom got divorced when I was about 3 or 4, so not a ton of memories with him. But talking to his friends, talking to my mom, like, everybody has good things to say about him. The addiction took him away from me. He was a great dad when he could be. He loved me. So I want people to kind of get off topic just a second. But if you're experiencing someone in your life does have addiction, like, they don't want to be trapped in that cycle. And so I just got to say, like, my dad did the best he could. Unfortunately, he couldn't do maybe all the things, and it required him and my mom to split. But I was so fortunate and grateful that my grandparents really helped pick up the slack. My grandparents on my mom's side. My grandfather would take me to school every day. I love that guy so much just because he retired and spent all his time with me so that I could have a father figure in my life, which is super important. And probably some of the reasons, we can talk about it later, I've gotten into the men's health area, probably because of him. And my grandmother, she worked until she was about 70 years old. She worked her way up at a cigar company. Tampa's a cigar capital of the world.
Yeah.
The funniest thing is, if you go somewhere else, like, nobody really smokes cigars, but if you're in Tampa, everybody smokes cigars. It's kind of funny. But, she worked her way up in the cigar factory. My mom was a school teacher, now college professor at the University of Tampa. So everybody's worked really hard, and I'm grateful that my family picked up the slack to really help me achieve the goals that I want to, because if you look at the statistics of single parent homes, it's tough to really get out of that cycle. And I'm so grateful to have had really loving family members to pick up the slack where it was needed to make sure that I got the opportunities in life that they felt like I needed.
Absolutely. Were you ever able to develop a relationship with your dad at any point in life?
Unfortunately, no. He had moved, and we just kind of didn't talk. We didn't really communicate with each other. I ended up playing college baseball at Miles College in Birmingham, Alabama. And when my career was over, I had decided to go up and see him. And this really sucks. It's kind of tough. But when I was driving up to go see him, he actually passed away when I was on the drive up. So I never got to meet him. I was waiting outside his apartment in Charleston, South Carolina, thinking all the bad things that you think, like, man, my dad's a drunk. Like, he didn't kind of hold up this end of the deal, but in reality, he passed away. Wow. And so I was this close to establishing a relationship with him and kind of meeting him and see where I came from. But unfortunately, that just wasn't in the cards for me. But I noticed that after he passed away, I could feel that there were certain things in my life that it kind of fell into place that hadn't been working out for me before. And I'm not necessarily religious, but I am spiritual. And I really feel like maybe the things that he couldn't do in the physical, maybe he was trying to help me, in the afterlife. And I just felt a calming presence after he passed away. So, I definitely hope that was him. Don't have any definitive answers on that. But, I like to think that him and my grandparents are watching over me now.
Wow. No, I'm sorry to hear that, but it sounds like everything you've been through has made you who you are.
Thank you. Yeah. I am about as resilient as they come. I would say, not to toot my own horn, but life comes at you, in the words of Theo Vaughn, and then it just serves you more life. So you got to keep on moving.
Absolutely, man. So you graduated high school and you went to play baseball.
Correct.
Had you played baseball through school?
I started playing when I was about 12. My grandfather he fought in World War II, so he was big in martial arts. Him and I really enjoyed watching Jean-Claude Van Damme. He had a buddy in the Army that was a huge martial artist, so I think that's kind of where he got it from. But we'd watch Jackie Chan, Jean-Claude Van Damme, all those movies. And when I was a kid, and so I was like, yeah, I'm going to do some martial arts. So sign me up for Taekwondo. We did boxing. I just did a lot of that stuff. And kind of as I got older, I noticed a lot of my buddies were playing sports, and kind of the martial arts and Taekwondo stuff, and boxing's kind of an individual sport to a degree. And I kind of wanted to play team sports. Played a little bit of football. Didn't really work out. Didn't really like getting hit too much. But baseball really stuck with me. So that became my passion. I played catcher and ended up getting a college scholarship out of it to kind of help out with my education. So it all worked out.
That's amazing. What'd you study?
So early on in college, I had I'm not here to play school, I'm here to play ball kind of thing, right? Okay. So I studied political science. It was a little bit easier. Yeah, it was a little bit easier. The school I was at kind of was focused on athletics, I would say, or at least I was focused on athletics. I probably put the school would be mad, but I was focused on athletics, and I was like, man, I'm in Alabama. I'm here to play baseball. Like, right. I could be in Florida,
I would not be here otherwise.
Right. So that was kind of my thing. And once I got out, I kind of needed something more. I think that's the big thing with a lot of college athletes is we never really plan on what life after sports is for us. And it eventually translated to, I coached some baseball and stuff, and you start to realize, like, you're old in the major leagues if you're like 30 something, right? But I'm 30 something right now. I'd be one of the older guys in baseball, right? I'm 36. So you got a whole life ahead of you after your career's over. And so while I wasn't that good to play at that level, I still had to realize, in my early 20s, well, what am I going to do for the rest of my life? And I coached baseball. I worked in pathology, and I worked on getting my chemistry degree. And somehow all these things kind of led up to me going to pharmacy school. And I just remember one year I had so many signs from, I guess, the universe, for lack of a better term, but people coming in and out of my life saying, hey, you should look into pharmacy. It's a growing career. There's a lot of opportunity there. And really, when you look back on it, it was when compounding pharmacy was really hitting, and you could bill for a lot of stuff, and compounding pharmacies were making a ton of money doing the pain creams and stuff. Sure. So maybe that was it. Maybe people were saying, like, oh, there's a lot of pharmacists making a lot of money right now. But just even people who weren't pharmacists, or just people were, I kept hearing pharmacy over and over again. And I'm not really one to turn down the signs. Like, at a certain point in time, it's slapping you in the face, right? Yep. I'm sure you've experienced it, right, Corey?
Absolutely.
So I just decided, kind of researching what it takes, what it entails, what my career options would be. And the next thing I know, I'm in pharmacy school at USF here in Tampa, Florida. I was grateful to get accepted here. I got to stay with my grandparents. I didn't have to move. And I got to stay with my family. A lot of people aren't that fortunate. Sometimes when you go to grad school, you got to go across the country, depending on where you get accepted.
Absolutely. What year was that?
That was when did I go? I think 2017, 2018.
Okay.
So I've been practicing for about 2 years now.
Wow. Okay.
And, so I graduated in 2022.
How long does it take?
And so it's a 4-year program.
Wow.
So
okay.
Yeah, so we're drug doctors, right? Or like, I'm the doctor of pharmacy. It's a PharmD degree. The older pharmacist, I think that group is kind of aging out of the profession right now. They're just RPHs. The pharmacy degree was just like a bachelor's degree.
Okay.
And a little bit more recently, it changed to a doctorate degree, just because we get so much education on medications. where you would think a doctor or a PA or someone, they get medication education, but they have so much other stuff. They have diagnosis, they have disease states, they have all kinds of things that are incorporated into their education, where we are 4 years pretty much of drugs.
Yeah.
How drugs impact the body, the mathematics that go with how drugs are concentrated in the body, all of that, like kidney failure or how drugs exposure to kidneys, liver, what kind of drug interactions you can get. I mean, you'd think maybe there isn't 4 years on it, but there's probably 8, really, right, when you break it down. And
for sure.
Yeah. And then you get into infectious disease and oncology, and infectious disease definitely is part of pharmacy, but like oncology's a completely different world. Like it's an oncology pharmacist just a different class of pharmacy altogether. So there's so many areas of pharmacy that are specialized, that have special medications, that those pharmacists they're drilled into that too. So it's so broad and there's so much information. I mean, you could probably be in school forever if you really wanted to be.
So do you work at a pharmacy?
So I did out of school. I worked for like kind of a central fill pharmacy, dispensing to ALFs, things like that, like long-term care, and kind of saw, this is where I kind of started to switch my career path. Is I saw that based on the experiences with my grandparents, like kind of at the end of their life, how they were being treated in the healthcare system, how much prescribing went on. I was working in that job and just realized that maybe I was contributing to the problem a little bit more than maybe being a solution. In assisted living facilities, there's a lot of prescribing that goes on. I don't know if you've had any experience with this, but there's a lot of patients in pain. There's a lot of patients that are dealing with a lot of health issues. So they're really trying to help them feel as comfortable as possible. And sometimes you get into some really dicey situations between, is the patient over prescribed? How many drugs do they have on, the interactions and things? And I kind of started to see this based on the experience that my grandfather had towards the end of his life. And my grandmother spent some time in assisted living and skilled nursing. And I just realized that there's so much prescribing. Like, why are there not more pharmacists involved with this? And so I quit that job. I started now what is my pharmacy consulting business called Your Tampa Healthcare Advocate. I'm an entrepreneur, and what I try to do now is I try to help people navigate the healthcare system and really kind of help them manage their medications, manage what diseases they have, get the appropriate testing, and really take a lot of the stress of the healthcare system off their plate so that they can focus on getting better. When you're really feeling sick already, and you're sick and you're tired, and then you have to go to a doctor, and then they give you information, and then they prescribe you, it's a lot. Yeah. It is so much. And so I really wanted to focus on helping people take that off their plate, give them the essential information that they need. I help them schedule their appointments. I'll go with them to their appointments if they need to, but just to have a voice there. And it's not to say that they don't know what to do or what to ask, but imagine if you're in a situation where you get a diagnosis that you're not expecting. What do you say? You're at a loss for words. I've been in the room with people that get a diagnosis that they didn't even think was coming, and they're just at a loss. Their jaw drops.
Right. They can't process anything.
Right. And I just try to be there as a support system, and I can start asking questions and getting them the information that they need, or maybe finding alternative treatments or referrals so that they can, not only are they going to get prescribed something usually, but then there's other healing modalities out there that we can try to find to at least keep them stable rather than decline. A lot of it depends on the disease state, the diagnosis, all that stuff. But what I really try to do is take all that stress and consolidate it. I'll take care of it, right? And you focus on getting better. I'll give you the tools to get better. We'll find the nutrients that you need, the right medications. And so in that process, I work with the physician or the provider. I work with the patient, and we come up with something tailored that the patient can actually use and move forward. And hopefully be able to take these tools with them and, get better. I mean, last year I really worked with a lot of people with diabetes, so that's kind of been my sweet spot. They found me, and we've had some nice reductions in A1C.
Wow.
And people just feeling better. We're not reinventing the wheel over here. We're just trying to take away the stress. And as you probably know, stress is a killer. Yeah. Right? It's a silent killer. It causes all kind of metabolic issues that it's not accounted for enough. So taking that away, you see people really are able to flourish now.
Is it common for you to be like, in a doctor's appointment with a patient, and the doctor says, I'm going to prescribe you this, and you're like, well, hold on, they're on this. You can't prescribe that with this.
So at times, usually we go in with a plan, right? We can once somebody hires me, I already know what drugs they're on. So we're aware. And then it really just depends on the doc, right? Some specialties don't have a lot of medications that might interact. But my biggest thing is making sure that all their providers speak together. So if you have a cardiologist, an endocrinologist, your primary care, right? You have all these doctors, and the unfortunate part of the healthcare system, and where I try to be the bridge, is that not all of their electronic health records speak to each other. So you have a lot of kind of untied loose ends in the healthcare system. And so the cardio might be in a different healthcare system than your endo, and your PCP might be in one of them so that they can talk, but this guy or gal is left out.
So
right. And so I just make sure that all the documentation is there. There's correct medication, up-to-date medication list, past medical history, insurance, everything is laid out for you. You just get to go. And then if you need me, I can go with. And so that's kind of where I'm at with it, is I'm just making sure everybody's on the same page. Usually a doctor can look and see an updated med list and say, okay, well, these drugs I'm going to prescribe might not work. Or we can have at least a healthy discussion of risk benefit, right? And so that's kind of how I'm doing. I'm trying to mitigate those issues before they even start, because frankly, if let's say a patient goes, they get prescribed something, they go pick it up at the pharmacy. After the fact, we realize there's an interaction. You're not, in Florida at least, you're not allowed to return your drugs. It's not like
and you
clothes,
can't get
right?
kind written for you.
Right. So you really have to be careful, and I try to mitigate those things before the patient wastes money.
Yeah.
On drugs that they might not be able to use or don't need. And so that's kind of where we're at with that, is a little bit of cost savings. It just piece a little bit of everything together to kind of form my service.
I've never heard of anybody doing anything like this. Are you the only one? Is this common practice?
So in Tampa, I would have to say that there's competition, right? Okay. There are people who are called healthcare advocates. Personally, I feel like I take it to another level. When you look at how much Americans are prescribed, right? We're the most prescribed country in the world. Okay. We're one of 2 countries in the entire world that are allowed to even advertise medications on TV right.
Really?
US and New Zealand. Yeah. Only 2 countries in the whole world that are allowed to advertise medications.
I had no idea. That's crazy.
Not to get too off track, but there's a coffee shop I go to here in Tampa, and someone from England came in, and she found out I was a pharmacist, and we're talking. She's like, it's appalling how much drug advertisements are on TV. We don't have any of that in England. I'm like, well, we're the only place that can really advertise that.
That's probably why they had to have those crazy disclaimers at the end, because we're the only country that allows it. That's wild. That's wild. I love hearing those disclaimers, though. This is the wildest things, man.
Oh, yeah. And the crazy part is everybody's dancing around and having a great time, and just the disclaimers are ridiculous: diarrhea, death, heart attack. You're just everybody's dancing around having a great time, but they could be shitting their pants and whatever at the same time. So sometimes those trip me up. Sometimes it's for a medication that no one's really up and dancing. If you're on that medication, your health has really declined,
right? You should
and
sit down.
No one's up really chasing their grandkids and up having a good time. So from a realistic pharmacist perspective, we're I don't know, you're stretching, but I won't call out any drugs. I don't want to piss anybody off, but There are some of those commercials that are just way out there, and you're like, I'm not really sure that's realistic, but good for you guys.
What's your take on big pharma?
So my take is, I think it's there. Yeah, so big pharma in a whole, we can all probably agree that they're pretty greedy, right? I personally think, as a pharmacist, I think medications are a fantastic tool for people. Now, there are some medications, like if you look at us, we're in America, we have some of the best medications, some of the best treatments in the entire world, things that people don't have access to in other countries, right? So there's that end of it where we can save lives like no other here in the US. On the other end, you have a lot of medications that are prescribed for, like, we'll say in my wheelhouse is more like metabolic disease. So diabetes, blood pressure, Alzheimer's, those type of things. And some of those diseases, for lack of a better term, can go into remission. You can kind of, for lack of a better word, cure them, right? If the right diet and lifestyle kind of gets incorporated and it's caught early enough. So I think medications are a fantastic tool for people. So we'll use diabetes as an example. It's easy for me to talk about. I think a lot of people know at least somebody that might be pre-diabetic or diabetic, right? So it's a good space for them to think about this. But when somebody has diabetes, they're not really processing the sugar that they're ingesting or their body's breaking down. And so they get on some medications. And what that does is prevent, it masks some symptoms to a degree, but it really helps somebody not have to risk heart attack or stroke or the things that come with diabetes, right? They have the opportunity to take this medication. The medication can help them lower their A1C, lower their blood sugar, and they can, if it's something in their cards, they can kind of turn their life around. They can make the lifestyle changes. They can start exercising a little bit more. They can start doing the things that are healing modalities without having the risk of heart attack, stroke, etc. And so that's why that's why medications are a great tool. Now, do I feel like these are lifelong treatments? Not always necessarily. Like, again, insulin for a type 1 diabetic they need it, they have to have it. Type 2 diabetes is a little bit different. It is reversible, and I'll argue with anybody who says it isn't, right? Obviously, if it's progressed too far, the pancreas isn't working the same, then it might not be. But pre-diabetic, early diabetic, you can definitely reverse that disease state and other ones like it. And so that's why I really like to think of medications as a tool and not necessarily the solution. On to big pharma, yeah, they're greedy. It's not always necessarily big pharma either, right? You have pharmacy benefit managers who, this is kind of something I really like to talk about because it's kind of controversial, but pharmacy benefit managers, in theory, their job is to negotiate cost savings for you, the consumer, me, the consumer. They approach a pharmacy manufacturer and say, hey, we're buying this much of a certain drug. Can we get a reduced price on it? In theory, they're supposed to pass the savings on to you. In reality, they just charge more and pass the savings on to them. And so, unfortunately, and this is kind of my final thought on big pharma, is pharma and the pharmacy benefit managers have really made pharmacists look bad. Because when you go to the pharmacy, somebody like me or a pharmacist is telling you, hey, your drug is going to be $900. Yeah. And you look me in the eye and you're like, choice words, right? With a lot of expletives. But that's kind of the problem, is that now pharmacists have become the face of high drug prices, drug availability issues. Right. Like, it's our fault, right?
Right.
And unfortunately, that's not true. It's the companies, it's the pharmacy, it's the PBMs, it's the manufacturers that are setting the price.
Right.
And then it's just coming back and we're kind of the scapegoat, really. We're the face that's telling you, hey, your drug is $900 and you're on a fixed income. And like, we're the ones getting cussed out, right? And so it's tough. As a pharmacist, we used to be one of the highest trusted professions in the US. I mean, not just in healthcare. Everybody trusted their pharmacist. And the way things have gone, people have lost trust in us, even though we have the knowledge, we have the education and training. We're giving people a lot of really sad news.
Yeah.
And they're losing trust in, well, the healthcare system, but pharmacy in general. I advocate for pharmacists because I am one, and I love this. I love the profession. I love the people in it. And so that's kind of why I'm sticking to the pharmacy.
I saw a video the other day, and since it's in your wheelhouse, I feel like I gotta ask you. It was saying that Alzheimer's and dementia are actually type 3 diabetes and treatable.
Yeah. So that's why I kind of mentioned Alzheimer's
Right.
in the metabolic disease area. Cancer is also a metabolic disease, right? And so Alzheimer's and dementia, they're starting to find out that it's a combination of, I would say more so preventable. They're treatable as in once somebody has Alzheimer's and dementia, there are medications, there are techniques and different modalities where you can kind of hold that at bay. You're not necessarily going to reverse it, right? Once the brain starts shrinking and deteriorating, it's really tough to bring it back. But the good thing is that our brains are awesome supercomputers. They are very mobile. Like if you brush your teeth with your non-dominant hand, you're building, good new neurons. If you're writing with your non-dominant hand, if you're doing things that are outside of your comfort zone, your brain, we call it like you have a lot of neuroplasticity. So your brain's able to adapt and adjust to all these different things. By doing those, by exercising, by eating the right foods, you can actually help your brain prevent that decay. Like, a lot of, I guess, wellness people that talk about genetics and things, I guess the old term is genetics kind of loads the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger.
Okay.
Right? If that's an easy way of putting that into perspective. So yeah, people can be genetically predisposed to Alzheimer's, cancer, diabetes, but at the same time, you can kind of shift your lifestyle to a way where those things can be prevented. I mean, the switches have to get turned on in order for cancer to happen. The same thing with Alzheimer's. So your brain, there are two great examples for Alzheimer's prevention. Get good sleep. Your brain has a bunch of fluid kind of holding everything in, right? When you sleep, a lot of that fluid gets flushed, goes down your spinal cord, whatever. It gets cleaned out, okay? So you don't have all this gunk building up in your brain, which is kind of one of the precursors to Alzheimer's. The other thing is exercise kind of does something similar. It helps your brain stay fresh. And then just eating good quality whole foods, rather than a bunch of processed high sugar things that are hard for our bodies to digest anyways. And keeping your gut, there's a third part to this, keeping your gut healthy. So again, back to the processed foods and things like that, where you have good bacteria, bad bacteria, it's all in. You really want to feed the good bacteria. So by feeding the good bacteria, your gut makes 90% of the neurotransmitters, not your brain. So your dopamine, your serotonin, all that, most of that's made in your gut, and then it gets transported to your brain. So if you have 3 brains, guys, I like to think guys have 4, you know what I'm talking about, but we have our brain, we have our heart, and we have our gut, right? And guys have the other brain. So, but having those 3 brains kind of in balance and healthy, you're preventing disease just by doing that.
Absolutely. Tell me some success stories once you started this advocacy thing and everything. I know you can't tell me specifically about a patient, but something, a time when you were like, you know what, I'm doing the right thing right now.
Okay. Well, I'll give you 2 examples. One was like one of my first patients, their success story. So when they came to me, they had a few different kind of health conditions, and most notable was their diabetes. They had an A1C creeping up on 8. They were they had a couple blood tests in the range when I started working with them from 7.8 to 8.2. I think they were probably closer to 7.8. And I kind of got them, they were taking their medications straight out of the bottle. So really no safety protocols in place. And so what I did was organize their medications in a little pill box. So, I mean, this guy he just had his bottles in a drawer, and every day he would take one out of the bottle. And so as a pharmacist, I'm like, oh, well, we we got to stop that.
Because
like, what if,
because like you don't know if you've taken, like you might take one or miss one, or take one twice
Right.
or miss one.
right.
Okay.
So it's just, if you have it all laid out for you, like, hey, on Monday, you take these drugs, boom.
Right.
And I'm just taking the thought out of it for him, right? Because what if later in the afternoon, like he's older, we all forget. So older people forget sometimes too. And I just didn't want him to go, oh crap, did I not take my blood thinner? And then he double doses and he ends up in the emergency room. So we laid everything out for him, explained to him what each of his medications do, made him a little bit more adherent. The education component helped him understand, rather than your doctor just saying, hey, take this, where they do try to explain it to you, but it's so much information in the doctor's office, who can really go home with all of that all the time anyways. So he starts getting a little more here to his medications. And I didn't really try to change, like he had a pretty healthful diet, like it was pretty diverse, but there was a lot of like crap in it too. And his big thing was he liked to eat ice cream like every night before bed. And it was bad enough that it was right before bed, where it's like the worst time to eat sugary foods, because your body needs to process that before you can rest appropriately. And so I said, hey, how about this? Like before we start, you can still eat your ice cream. I'm not trying to take away the things that you enjoy, but let's do like maybe 2 or 3 nights a week, eat some fruit instead. Like, let's just make this easy change. You tell me how it works. Can you do that? He said, yeah. We found the kinds of fruit he liked. Like he ate fruit, just not all the time. So didn't really have a problem with it. It was easy transition for him. Started eating fruit a couple nights a week. Started eating out less, and him and his wife would like cook more at home and just doing that. And so just by doing that and then going for little walks, and he actually started working with a personal trainer a couple times a week, just doing some very functional movement, get up, get down, that kind of stuff that really elder people need.
Yeah.
A burpee is like a help I've fallen and can't get up, right? So if you can do a burpee, as hard and crappy as they are, you can stand up on your own. So that's kind of like functional stuff that he was doing, not doing a lot of burpees, but you know what I'm saying, like squats and up and down in a chair walking. And we go into his next doctor's appointment, and his A1C's down to like 6 something.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, cool. Like almost went down a full point. I'm like, that's cool. And he says he's feeling better. I lobbied for a dose reduction on one of his medications. I got it. So I said, hey, let's just try this. And the next A1C reading, which was 3 months later, it was down even more. It was like 6.1. And the next one, he was actually down to 5.5. So really technically a healthy, normal A1C.
Wow.
Still considered diabetic because he took one medication, but was able to get 2 of his diabetes medications off his list. He's down to 1 and still doing really well, kind of still adhering to everything. So it's a sustainable change rather than I'm going to crash diet and do all these things. And then like, well, now I'm good. And right. And then you lose them. So by just organizing his meds, making him more adherent, and having a good sustainable change, he still has diabetes, but it's very much so under control. His risks for heart disease and strokes are way down now because he's got healthy blood sugar.
Oh, that's amazing.
I love it. I see him all the time. Like he's like my prized, my prized client. And then the other one where I really knew I was doing good was actually in December of 2023. So very recently. Really nice lady came to my office for a consult and ended up hiring me. Also had type 2 diabetes, and hers was more out of like uncontrolled, right? So her A1C was going up. They put a bunch of meds on her, and her A1C was still going up. She was kind of alarmed. She's like, why they keep prescribing me stuff? This is like almost going in reverse to what you would think is happening. So I looked at her meds, told her, hey, we can potentially make some changes here as far as getting you on a better dose of med. Like, things are a little bit kind of less harsh on her. And so this is my favorite. So we go see her provider, and the PA came in, the physician's assistant, And the physician assistant said, "Oh, did you bring your grandson this time?" And she said, "No, this is actually a pharmacist I hired because I need more information on my meds and I'm like not getting them here." And this PA yelled at me for 15 minutes and I didn't even get a chance to say anything. I just sat there and smiled and I was like, okay. And continued to kind of like go at me and just be like being like super unprofessional, right? And I was just like, well, I'm just here to kind of help the patient. I don't really know what your deal is. Yeah, like, and so at that point when I felt like I could just sit down in the chair and have a presence in a room that disrupted someone, and like maybe deep down in their heart they knew that they weren't really like doing the right thing. Yeah, that is when I really knew, like, I'm gonna stick to this. It's gonna be awesome. And like, to clear it up, I don't want that interaction. Like, I would 10 out of 10 times not want that interaction. I'm not there to like tell somebody how to do their job or change the way that they practice. I'm just there looking out for the patient and doing what a pharmacist would do according to my education and training. Nothing different. I'm not like making this stuff up or pulling it out of thin air. I'm using the guidelines. I'm using what the patient tells me. I'm using their experience in mind to kind of formulate a plan so that they can get healthier. Even if it's like, hey, can we just switch one drug to another that's a little easier for them to take, or, you know, something that helps their process, lowers their pill burden or whatever, not increases. They're taking like 3 of the same drug in one day. Can we just switch drugs and do one, right? Like, easy stuff like that just makes the healthcare experience easier on them. So a week later, I guess that PA called my client and was like, hey, I'm willing to work with you. But it changed how she practiced. It changed her perspective just by me walking in the room. And so that made me happy. And I knew this is what I need to be doing, because it's helping people get the care that they need. It's holding people who have been non-accountable accountable. And overall, I think the healthcare system means well. There's a lot of good doctors, PAs, nurses out there, pharmacists. But I think that sometimes the metrics that insurance makes them bill on, it's more so that the constraints that they have make it harder to practice the way that they want to, not so much the provider itself.
Sure. Is that common for doctors to kind of feel like you're stepping on their toes a little bit?
No, most like to work with me. Okay. Most doctors do appreciate pharmacy because we can kick ideas off each other. I say, hey, like, what about this drug? We kind of nerd out sometimes and have some good conversations on new studies that came out, things like that too. It really helps them hone in on their practice. It helps me hone in on my practice. And really, at the end of the day, the healthcare system is kind of shifting to this interdisciplinary approach where everyone works together. Believe me, there are some in there, no matter what profession, that don't want to work together. And, you know, that's fine. But I think that the people who do want to work together and do want to do what's best for the patient are the ones who excel. They make the most money, they get the most results, the most positive Google reviews, the healthiest patients. All those things really reflect positively when you do work together. Like, I don't know everything, and I know it, and I admit it. I'm here on your podcast admitting I don't know everything, but somebody else does, and we can work together to find a good decision or whatever works best for the patient.
No doubt, man. No doubt. What is the biggest obstacle that you face?
As far as
the advocacy, the pharmacy, the medical field, you know.
I think there's different ones, right? Like, some people are on a budget, and that's can be tough because they might not be able to get the best medication for them. It costs too much. Sometimes it could be the provider, right? Sometimes it could be the disease, where the disease has progressed so far that it's really hard to do too much for them, other than advocate for them and try to get them what they can do. So I just try to work with what they have and what they can utilize to kind of help them move forward. You know, I'm cash pay. Pharmacists don't really have a lot of billable services, but I feel like my services are affordable for everyone. Like, you know, if you can go get your haircut, you can probably come to me at least for a little bit. I mean, you might not get all my full time, just because it's a lot, but I can at least help people kind of point them in the right direction, give them the education that they need and things like that, and at least give them some notes on to what to ask for, right? So I try to make everything affordable, but really I think there's so many constraints in the healthcare system. I mean, if you have more healthcare providers on here, a lot of them will say the healthcare system is broken. Yeah. You have a lot of doctors switching to cash pay because they aren't able to spend the time they want to with their patients. And so by going to cash pay, that's a different beast, different conversation for a different day. But hey, like if they can spend an hour with their patient, answer all their questions, run some extra tests, do whatever, rather than the typical, 10 minutes, I'm out, right? And who feels like they got something out of that? I mean, how much can you really get out of 10 minutes if half of it's like, hey, how you doing, right? So there's a lot of different hiccups, and I just try to bulldoze right through them sometimes,
Where do you hope to be with all this in like 5 years?
Ideally, I would really like to have a platform where we could have different healthcare providers for my clients and things be able to communicate with each other, still be HIPAA compliant, but opening the lines of communication in healthcare. Because when everybody works together and everybody collaborates, I think it just works on so much better for the patient. But at the same time, I would really, truly love to be an advocate for my profession of pharmacy. I think I would so much so want to change the way that the public feels pharmacists are perceived. Like, Corey, if I said, hey, you're going to meet a pharmacist today, I'm going to kind of prejudge here. It was like, you probably thought, oh, maybe I'll talk to somebody that works at CVS or Walgreens.
Right. No, that's what I figured, honestly, yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, and when I tell people I'm a pharmacist, they're like, oh, do you work for CVS? Do you work for Walgreens? And I want to shift the perspective of thinking immediately that someone works at a chain pharmacy. Like there's hospital pharmacists, there's nuclear pharmacists, there's people like me, there's a healthcare advocate pharmacist. There's so many different things that we can do. But the way that I guess we're perceived is that we're just pharmacy behind the counter, right, counting pills and dispensing. And I want people to know that our skill set, our knowledge, our training is so much more than sitting behind a counter and counting pills and just dispensing. And I want people to realize how diverse of a skill set and how valuable of a skill set pharmacists have. And that is really, in 5 years, I would love to have changed a good majority of the public perspective on that.
Absolutely. How would you build that platform? Would it be like an app?
Yeah, it would be an app. We've kind of kicked the tires on it a little bit just to kind of see what the cost is going to be. And there's a lot of roadblocks that are going to be involved. Yeah. Right. But I think that it's definitely possible. HIPAA is a big roadblock there. You have to have a compliant app. And so there are definitely some hiccups there. We're going to work through it as best as we can. And if the app doesn't necessarily come through, fruition, I feel like to a degree, some sort of technology that's going to bridge the gap between healthcare providers speaking to each other or something, rather than me running around with paperwork and, sending faxes and stuff like that. I mean, the craziest thing is like the healthcare system still uses fax machines. It's like 1986, bro.
Why is that? Do they feel it's more secure than email? I never understood that.
Corey, I've got no clue. I couldn't answer that question, and I will be completely honest with you, but I know that I've called doctors' offices and say, hey, can I email this document over? And they're like, no, we don't do email, we just do fax. And I'm like, is this like 1984? Like, what is going on?
That makes no sense at all.
And it's not like faxing is secure.
No,
it's not like the most secure thing ever. Like it's, I don't understand. I think it's just one of those things that has stayed in place and has just been so grandfathered in that it's hard to transition off of it. But I have a secure server at my office that I send my clients, I send them all their documents through that server. Mm-hmm. So there's
better ways to do it.
Right. Is it foolproof? No. Is it as secure as I can make it and HIPAA compliant? Absolutely. Right. Like, I don't think anybody's going to be hacking into my office. Right. Like, there's plenty of other things that are way more valuable to hack into. But
No, what could you get from doing that?
right, like, oh, you're gonna find out like homeboy's blood pressure medication. Okay, cool. Like, there's no billing info on that, stuff like that. You're not stealing somebody's credit card off my computer. But I just think it's just one of those things where people, like, the healthcare system is, again, like, sometimes so ingrained into a way of thinking, into a way of doing. I would love, in 5 years, I would love to get them off faxes, right? That would be such a great goal.
Hell yeah. Is there a difference between the quality of meds from like chain places like CVS and Walgreens to mom and pop pharmacies?
So there can be. As far as the medications that you get straight from the manufacturer, those are all the same. The mom and pop pharmacies, usually in order to stay alive, they will compound or they will provide a very specific service that will afford them kind of more cash pay rather than dealing with insurance. Unfortunately, like, we can kind of go back into this PBM conversation where you'll see that a large company will be able to, they just have so many more resources, so they can undercut the mom and pop pharmacies. And what happens too is that mom and pop pharmacies, they have to use these PBMs sometimes to acquire the drugs that they need to serve their patients. And what will happen is something will, an easy example would be like something gets prescribed and maybe the prescriber, like the Ozempic stuff, right? Initially that was for type 2 diabetes, but prescribers are prescribing it for weight loss because it works. And so there was this whole thing where you had to fill out this coupon card and you could get the Ozempic for a good price, affordable price. And what happened is you had to check the box that said you had type 2 diabetes right? And so people would just check it, send it in. And what would happen is a PBM would say, oh no, that wasn't prescribed appropriately. And they pull the funds out of the mom and pop pharmacy's account. Like they're called drug utilization fees and all kind of stuff like that. And so these big like PBMs and these companies, all of a sudden, or they'll be like, oh, there's a $10,000 fine for whatever. And it just gets pulled. And so they're really putting a chokehold on the little guy.
Wow.
And so those mom and pop pharmacies, they'll compound, they'll do other things that they can make specialized medications. So if you had an allergy to something, we can make a special medication for you that doesn't have the whatever's irritating you or you're allergic to in it. You can still get the active ingredient that you need, but it doesn't have all the other crap in it that's going to create an allergic reaction or whatever. So they really have to specialize. They got to get a little bit creative. And they, in my experience in working with some of these pharmacies, like, they have to keep moving. Once they get stagnant, it's an easy place for a big PBM or a big pharmacy to kind of like just swoop in and undercut them for whatever reason. I mean, there's a million ways that they can do it. So, but yeah, it's tough for the little guy.
Yeah. What are some of the biggest misconceptions about pharmaceutical meds in general?
Well, I think people are really kind of educating themselves now. So I think some of those myths are kind of going away. But I would say the biggest misconceptions, let's see. I would say that a lot of people are starting to realize that they can change their lifestyle and change the way that they live, and that they don't necessarily need them anymore. And I think the biggest thing that I've seen in my time practicing and the time I've been working with clients one-on-one is that they are starting to understand that it's not the solution. That, it's not just oh, my doctor gave me this because I have this disease. And I'm going to kind of shift your question a little bit to, instead of the misconception of the drugs, maybe more the misconception of the disease, where people are no longer identifying themselves. If somebody would say, I'm not a diabetic anymore. I'm a person, I have diabetes, but I am not the disease. And I think that's where people are really starting to change where their perception of healthcare is, or their health. And I think, unfortunately, fortunately and unfortunately, like, the pandemic happened, right? But it also it put the healthcare system under a spotlight, and it wasn't a good one.
Yeah.
And I think people started to do the research and people started to change the way that they're treating their healthcare because of that. So it couldn't, it was a horrible thing that happened, and we're kind of still dealing with it. But it was great in some aspects where people, when they lose trust with something, they're going to find another way.
Yeah.
And they lost trust with it, and they started to find out, like, I'm no longer a diabetic. The disease doesn't define me. These drugs don't define me. I am a person living with this. But they also, I think, realize that, like, look at the wellness community, how that's popped up since COVID, right? I mean, you have so many more healing modalities. IV therapies popped up so much more. Red light therapy, different therapies, all these different healing modalities. Some are big time woo-woo, some have science behind them, some are somewhere in between, right? but they're there. And half of it is in your brain. How you talk to yourself, how do you treat yourself? And if you look in the mirror every day and you say, I'm a diabetic, it's going to stick to you.
Yeah.
Right?
It's like
if you say, you are what you consume. You are what you say about yourself. Your body is fully able to read and comprehend all those things. It's not, you speak it, it's true. And the more you speak it, the more true it becomes. And so I think people are starting to realize that they can fight chronic disease. It's no longer a life sentence for a lot of people like it was probably before the pandemic.
Yeah. What are some of the big woo-woos in wellness right now?
Oh, man.
I'm going to use that term from now on, by the way.
I love it. Yeah, we say it too. Like, I'm not afraid of the woo-woo, right? I think maybe before I would think that people probably thought breath work was a little bit woo-woo, like, oh yeah, I'm just going to breathe and feel better. Yeah, right. But it works. Yeah. It's true. I'm a big fan of alternate nostril breathing, where you cover up one nostril, you breathe in, cover up the other one, you breathe out, and then you breathe back in. It's actually like working both sides of your brain.
Huh.
I like box breathing. I had a whole pharmacy when I was in pharmacy school doing different breath work exercises after lunch, because we were in such a stressful environment and the calls started just booming in after lunch.
Yep.
We're just like, all right, we're going to breathe. And then really, how many times in your life, or any of your audience listening, how many times do you guys stop and take 10 deep breaths for yourself?
Yeah.
A lot of people don't do it.
No.
Right? Like, you're sitting there, you're in the rut.
Like a lot. Like one helped.
Right. But 10 deep breaths, that's probably not even 5 minutes of your day.
Sure.
And it can completely change the trajectory of your day. I used to think light therapy was big woo-woo, but they're incorporating it into like integrative medicine places that treat cancer. There's a place called Hope for Cancer in Cancun that incorporates a lot of light therapy.
You mean like red light therapy?
Yeah.
Yeah, man, I'm just hearing about that for the first time recently. I'd never known anything about it.
Yeah, they're showing that it does like help cellular repair to a degree. I was like, yeah, you're going to shine a light on me? Like, I don't know about this. But there's benefit to it. And who knows, like, if it's the placebo effect. But if it's a placebo and it works, who cares?
It still works.
Right? Like,
yeah.
Right. That's why when you look at a lot of these studies that the FDA runs on drugs, like, there's always a placebo control. And sometimes people in the placebo get better.
Yep.
It sounds crazy, but
that's what we were talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your mind is so powerful and your body is so powerful. If you tell yourself that you can heal and you tell yourself that you're going to do something, you probably will.
Yeah, absolutely.
But biggest woo, I don't know. You tell me some woo-woos that you've heard of, you've heard about. I don't know. Like,
everybody has these like new little juice concoctions that are supposed to bring like, the mood boost and energy and this and that. Like, what do you think of those?
Oh, okay. Well, if it has like a lot of processed sugar in it, I probably would say that they're crap. But I think juicing is great. I think blending is better. So if you can blend your fruits and vegetables and things, you'll just get more fiber. You'll get more nutrients that you would lose. If you're just juicing, you miss out on some stuff. Like, it just gets kind of thrown in the pulp. The juice cleanses and things. I mean, I think fasting is great. I don't think fasting is woo-woo at all. There's some really great studies in Japan that show it lowers, if you fasting for 3 days, like 3 to 7 days, lowers your cancer risk in your life by like 70% or something. Wow. If you do it like once a year, it's crazy.
Wow.
It just gives your body a reset. I mean, think about how much energy your body puts on digesting food when it could, and then you're not digesting food. So you go into something called autophagy, and your body starts cleaning up all the damaged cells. It starts cleaning up, like any of your red blood cells. It cleans up your immune system. I was reading one of the studies out of Japan. It's been a while since I've read it, but they were taking people's blood every day when they were fasting. And around day 3, they noticed that people's white blood cell count dipped really far. So you think, oh, it's a really bad thing. You're like, oh, their immune system or something's going all whack. But what was actually happening was their body was cleaning up all the damaged white blood cells, or the white blood cells that had taken a virus or something and not made it to the lymphatic system. And so your body's now using that energy to clean everything. And so then when they went into a more fed state, the immune system was more robust. Their red blood cell count was better. Cancer risk goes way, way down just on a 3-day fast, like once a year. And, 3 days isn't a lot out of your year. And personally, I fasted before. The food tastes so much better at the end of it. Like, you're so grateful that you get to eat, man. It's awesome. Excuse me?
How long did you fast for?
The longest fast I've ever done was 6 days.
6 days? Do you,
6
you
days.
Don't eat or drink anything?
Oh, no, you drink. You drink water.
Just drink water.
Water, electrolytes. I mean, you have to replenish your electrolytes. That was a mistake. Like the first time I ever did a fast, I fasted for 5 days. And it was before I started pharmacy school. I was working kind of at a pathology lab. I was doing a little bit of everything. I was working in the lab. I was doing some sales. I was like all over the board, just jack of all trades there. Really living an unhealthy lifestyle, drinking way too much, eating at nice restaurants, and while delicious, probably not the greatest, thing that you can eat daily. A lot of like T-bone, tomahawk steaks,
sure.
Great. I mean, they're awesome, right?
Yeah.
A lot of old fashions, wine, all that good stuff. And so I was like, man, I'm going back to school. I'm older. I've already had a career. I need to clean this up a little. I need to clean this up a little bit. And I've been reading about fasting and the benefits of it. And I just decided to try it. I didn't do a great, I made it 5 days. I didn't really do a great job because I kind of missed some parts until the end. I wasn't replenishing my electrolytes like I should have been. And so fortunately, nothing happened with my health. But man, I remember, I'll never forget, I had a little bit of watermelon and a hard-boiled egg to break that fast. And I was like so grateful. It was almost like a spiritual experience. Just the watermelon was the best thing I ever ate. The egg was like the best egg ever. Like the egg, I could have probably compared the egg to like one of those T-bone, those tomahawk steaks, and been like, this is so much better, right?
Perspective.
And then when I did the 6-day one, I actually learned about how to fast the right way. Sure. I would say the first 2 days are really difficult.
That's what I was going to ask. Like, your stomach's growling like crazy. All you can think about is food. But then eventually, do you kind of go in like an autopilot mode?
Yeah. Your body kind of just like, you get energy. Towards the end, like I was definitely getting tired, right? Like, all right, I haven't put in energy in a while. I'm starting to get tired. I hear that after you get past 7 days, that the energy comes back. You start, your body starts using more fat for fuel and things like that. So you kind of get a ramp up, but you have to get into it. I made it 6. By day 5, I was like exhausted, but still like my focus was good. And what I noticed probably the most out of me is I was sleeping a lot better. Like I was tired. I was just like passing out at night. Right. But I just felt like my sleep was so good. I would wake up every day and I felt well rested.
Okay.
Whereas before, maybe not so much.
I can't believe that's not dangerous to go like more than 7 days. Like, what's the longest that you can fast?
I think you can go, like if you're hydrating appropriately, I think it's like 21 days without food, maybe. But I mean, I think Jesus went like 40.
Right. That's what I was
thinking. I mean, I don't know.
He was in the desert.
Right. Yeah. Where did he even get water from? So, I don't know. I've heard of people going a long time and being able to do it. That would definitely be like go somewhere, get medically supervised,
Yeah, that's what I figured.
Really, hone it in. But you really don't need more than like 3 days. You can go 7. Like 3 days is kind of like you're gonna, 3 to 4 days, you're gonna get all the benefits of it, pretty much. I think the biggest thing I would say is like don't fast for weight loss, because like once you start eating again, you're gonna kind of just put the weight back on. Okay. So it's not really a weight loss thing. It's more of a true cleanse of the body, and it allows your body to clean itself out. And like I just said, like just think of all the energy that you're putting on digestion. And your body is such an efficient, beautiful machine, and it is able to repair and heal itself. You just kind of have to give it the ability to allocate the energy somewhere else rather than just digesting food.
Absolutely. Now, before we end the interview, man, like what's the best life advice or health advice that you would have for anybody watching?
I think that's a great question, Corey. I think that being able to, life advice, I would say, and this kind of goes into health too, is like be yourself. Don't let people, the internet, social media, the influence of the outside kind of taper down who you are. I think that people fall in love with people. I'm not saying this like romantically, but people fall in love with people who are genuine, who are themselves, who are authentic. And I mean, you can tell when somebody's like not being themselves and they're just putting on a show to be liked or, pretend to be something that they're not. I'm a fan of full authenticity. Be yourself. And I think that's where you're going to make the most true friends. And I think that that's where you're going to get the most out of life, is just fully being yourself. I think, imagine how stressful it is to pretend to be something that you're not, right? Like you take away all that stress, you take away all that anxiety, and if you're just yourself. And that's really what I would probably have to say, is be yourself. And then one other thing is, I tell this to everybody. I have students that ask me like, dude, how did you start a business and like do all this stuff? Like I have experience. Like I didn't just like, snap my fingers. I have some past experiences that allowed me to do this. But anything in the world that you want to do, you can do it. And I say that wholeheartedly. I tell students, I tell adults, I tell everybody, like it takes work. You have to do it. Like there is no short road to whatever achievement that you want. But I think that you can live your full life. You can live your best life in whatever capacity that you want. But you have to believe in yourself first. Screw what everybody else thinks, and just go do it. And those are like the 2 tips that I live by, that I tell people. Anybody who asks me advice like you just did, those are the ones I tell them. Like, be yourself and do what you want, because like in my experience with my grandparents and stuff, life is short. And imagine getting to that point where at a certain point, maybe you can't do all the things that you want to do. But imagine getting to that point and looking back and going like, damn, I should have, I could have. And so that's why I take those opportunities to do what you want to do and enjoy and get everything out of life that you can.
Absolutely, man. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for sharing everything you did. This has been an awesome episode of Conversations with Character with Patrick Alonso, pharmacist, advocate. He's doing it up, man. I love what you're doing. I can't wait to see where you go from here. Hit him up, follow him up. I'll see y'all next time. Peace out.
The most prestigious network in the land, the Signature Series Network.